The feels! Ooh, what did you think of the end of Wonder Man? Did you make it to the end? If you didn't, I hope this spoiler review inspires you to get back in there and finish this thing, because it's beautiful, man. So yes, I'm super curious to see if the binge model helps this show, because while I love Wonder Man, I love it so much, I am like really sure that this thing would have been DOA as a weekly. People never would have gotten past the first few episodes, which would have been a real shame. And it's a real shame what's happening to A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. It's tough to watch. I mean, the audience, at least we saw the initial numbers. It seemed pretty big, but the hype overall seems low. And well, I think it might have been a major miscalculation by the showrunner to lean so heavily into comedy at the beginning, at least. I mean, it's going to get real unfunny real fast, but it's a weekly. And the question always is, will people get to the end? You got to start, you not only have to finish strong, but you got to start strong to keep people engaged. A tale of two shows indeed. I'm finding it fascinating to watch them and compare the two, because they have a lot of similarities. But right now we're talking about Wonder Man. And I wonder if you love the ending here as much as I did. I didn't see the twist coming. Well, the first twist. I kind of started to see the second twist coming, and it was beautiful. I was like, the payoff here is insane. We'll talk about that second twist in a moment. But the first twist, that was a real surprise. That Trevor Slattery decided to take the blame for Simon's explosion, his powerful blast from his powers at the studio, destroying the big Wonder Man set. When it happened, I was like, oh, did you just destroy your own set, Simon? Oh, noes. But it was Trevor's fault, because he admitted to Simon that their friendship was actually, it had started because Trevor had been blackmailed into spying on Simon for the Department of Damage Control, who want to lock Simon up to justify their expensive super prison, which is half empty. I appreciated the real world motivations. They weren't doing it for public safety or to do the right thing or because they thought that was what the right thing was. They were worried about losing their jobs and they had a quota to fill. So it was sadly very true to real life. I like the realistic aspects to this show quite a bit. But anyway, Simon felt so betrayed because Trevor was the only real friend he'd ever had, and his emotions trigger his powers. So he went kablam! And it was really amazing to see how powerful that he was. And when they said, we're going to the apartment now, we're coming, I thought that just like Simon did, that they were going to his apartment. But in fact, they were going to Trevor's because Trevor confessed. He released yet another tape as the Mandarin, telling the public that he had assumed the persona once more. He was back and that he had set off the bomb at the studio as an anti-Hollywood message, which is very in line with what Shane Black wrote back in the day with Iron Man 3. And the DODC, they just needed a body for a cell. So they'd take Trevor, even though that agent knew that he was covering for Simon. But hey, he wanted the win. He wanted his superiors to think he did a great job. So he went along with it. Not just Hollywood, but life, and many times is a business transaction. And so again, love the realism there as well. And so yes, because of Trevor's sacrifice, Simon still gets his dream to be a movie star, which leads to twist number 2. So yeah, twist number 2 is that instead of making Wonder Man 2, Simon, even though he could have enjoyed being the movie star he'd always wanted to be, Trevor had set that up for him as like this half sorry, half gift, right? Simon just couldn't enjoy it without his mentor and his friend, Trevor Slattery. Wow. And this is where the show, in my mind, becomes truly special. Because Simon then pulls a Trevor. Yes, Trevor taught Simon many things. To act, to not be ashamed of himself. And also how to pull a con. To use his acting ability. We see Simon saying he's going to shadow this average middle American guy, right? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to make a movie based on your life. And as soon as he said that, I was like, that's a security guard at the Supermax prison. But you know what? I love that they took their time getting there still. They could have cut right to the prison. but they just made you wait for it. You were like, whoa, Simon, are you doing what I think you're doing? That is so great. It's like, I feel like Kristen Wiig in that surprise SNL sketch where you're like, oh my God, Trevor's going to be so excited when he sees you. This is incredible. And in fact, I think the payoff, they didn't make you wait too long. So the payoff when they were they were finally driving to work, he's like, yeah, I'll let you shadow me at work. I finally got you in. And then you see, as they're driving, you see come over the horizon, the Supermax prison. And you're like, we're doing it. This is just incredible. I think it works particularly well as a binge. Like maybe the payoff wouldn't have been as cool week to week. But after having invested at that point, like a little over 3 hours in the story, you were like, oh, you were like locked in. At least I was. So yeah, we see that just like Trevor might have been conning Simon, he also helped him. He's a con man with a heart of gold. And so was Simon. And so Simon helped the security guard, right? Helping with his physical health training. He's like, let's get you in shape, buddy. And then also by depositing anonymously quite a bit of money. I'm sure Simon's holding on to some of it because they're obviously going to have to go on the run now. But quite a bit of money into this guard's account to help him out. The guard said the whole reason he took this job was because he needed to pay health costs for his daughter and his family. And so Simon made it that he wouldn't have to take a job that was harmful to him just for monetary reasons. So yeah, also because Simon was like clearly about to get this guy fired and maybe investigated. So it was very nice that he, kind of was like, hey man, I don't want any red in my ledger, right? As Natasha used to say. But it was it really is like a con man with a heart of gold. It's a tale as old as time, but it's a tale as old, what is Hollywood but revisiting genres and tropes? But the reason these things last for so long is that they work. And so that was just fantastic. And as these scenes unfolded, and I knew what Simon was doing. He was going to get Trev. I was like, they're doing Midnight Cowboy. Of course, the movie that was playing when they first met each other. And I was like, is this show smart enough to actually do a Midnight Cowboy? And it is. Oh, I always love that so much. Because in Midnight Cowboy, you have these two guys, total opposites, who are thrown together by circumstance and desperation. Yet, over the course of the story, they go through so much together that they just end up clinging to each other for hope. I have something to say about this at the very end. I guess I'll say it now. I think the message here is that, at the beginning of the season, Trevor and Simon are believing in something. Fame, fortune, recognition, instead of someone. But when they find someone instead of something, that's the real magic. It's just so beautiful. And I think that's a lot of what's going on in Midnight Cowboy. And, think about it, right? Like they both gave up what mattered to them most, right? The thing, right? Like they both for a moment there were going to be in Wonder Man, which was going to make all their dreams come true. And Trevor gave it up first. And then Simon let go of it as well, which is also really beautiful. Because at the end of the day, their friendship mattered most. There's a moment where Trevor, even after the horrible betrayal he's done to Simon, and at that moment, Simon thinks it's cost him everything because he lost his temper and exploded on the set. But Trevor reaches out to him. I mean, what a leap of faith. And it's rewarded. It's reciprocated because Simon picks up. That is a true bond. That's a true human connection. That you, even after the horrible things that each other has done and the betrayal, that you still just can't deny hearing that person out. Okay, now let's talk about the prison break. Clearly, as I said in my non-spoiler review, this show doesn't have the budget for Simon's powers. But I really applaud them for working that hindrance into the script to take a minus and make it a positive, right? So so they make it a secret. They make Simon's powers this terrible secret so that not only is the powers dawn on Simon, they dawn on the audience and even the government, right? Like the government knows Simon. Well, I think even the DODC is playing up how dangerous he is just because they want to lock him away, right? But then when they go and they study the blast at the studio, they realize that he has the ability to manipulate ions. And I love that they're like, he could either be a real problem or a real asset, right? They're like, wait a minute, maybe we don't want to lock someone that powerful up. maybe we want to use them. So if there is a Wonder Man season 2, maybe not only like the Avengers might be going after Simon and Trevor, but maybe the government as well, right? Like now, just like he wanted to, everybody finally, they wanted to cast him in movies. Maybe they want to now put him in different types of productions, the Avengers or with the government. I think that's all really interesting. I really think they could do great stuff with these characters. All right. Now, I'm not a science bro, but even I can tell that his ionic powers make Simon Williams incredibly powerful. Here's how he looks in the comics. It's a very visually oriented power in the comics. And they kind of hinted at that here, with the particles flying around at the end. But during this season, we did see his super strength, right? And his ability to create these really powerful blasts with his entire body. And you think to yourself, if this is Simon holding back, what could he do? There was a part of me that wondered if it was irresponsible of him not to help people with his abilities. And I wonder if maybe, again, that's something they could explore going forward. Sometimes actors are accused of being selfish. People in Hollywood are accused of being selfish. And again, that's, another thing to potentially explore. But I think this season is perfect the way that it is. But it was a question that I had. I guess, because Simon kept it to himself, he's never really had these conversations with anybody else before. And Trevor's certainly not going to be somebody who's like, maybe you should use your powers for good. All right. So anyway, now for the entire show, again, Simon has been holding back because he's rejected his powers. He doesn't want to be a superhero. He's kept them bottled up as a secret, right? And that's why his emotions are controlling them for most of the show. But at the end of the season, he gives up being Wonder Man, the movie character, to be Wonder Man for real. And again, I love using that. I wonder if at the end of the show, it's really supposed to be about, a couple of things, but I wonder if one of those is that it's about Simon and Trevor embracing being Wonder Man and the Mandarin, their real life, bigger than life identities, right? And we're going to circle back to that about how this show plays around with like sci-fi and real life and how there are parallels. And, you're actually living more of a superhero story right now than you might think. But yeah, like at the end of the show, they really are the Mandarin and Wonder Man. And I think that's really, really interesting. By the way, I loved seeing, even though it was so amazing and so effective, like, even though, again, it was just this brief little flashback, but to see Trevor's first audition for the Mandarin when he didn't even really know what he was auditioning for. But to see him be manipulated by the casting director, but also, Trevor is as much a victim as a con man himself. He's not a top of the pile con man. He's just a survivor. But to see him finding the character, right? I mean, that was incredible. It really underscores some of the great choices that Trevor made to become the Mandarin. I think the most powerful being the voice that he chooses. But you see him find that voice when they give him the sunglasses as a prop. And we're going to talk about that as well. But I hope when you watch the show, you pay attention to how little things can help the actor, and that it's the job of the people around them, be it the director or the casting director or whoever's their scene partner, to give them that little gift that it gives them that spark. And Simon, what is he but a bunch of sparks, right? But it's give them that spark of imagination, of creation. And that's what those sunglasses are. And it sends Trevor on just an incredible life journey, on a different path. So anyway, back to the prison. We first see that Simon can disrupt the cameras, right? But then after he literally rips the bars off of Trevor's cell, and Trevor, he's doing okay. He's been in prison before. Love the Crocs, Trev. But Trevor's like, how are we going to walk back out of this prison? The security is insane. And Simon's like, we're not walking out. And I was like, is he going to blast a hole in the other side of the wall and they're going to go out that way? But no, they blasted out the ceiling. So Simon grabs Trevor, which was really fantastic, right? And I love that Trevor, his faith in Simon was rewarded. The acting on this show is incredible. That's, I think, the biggest special effect here. But as Simon kind of powers up, Trevor looks down and notices that they're hovering. Because he had asked Simon earlier, can you fly? And, Simon hadn't answered him. And it turns out that he can. I thought that was incredible. And they blast out of the prison flying. And you only see it from far away. But I have to tell you, that image meant so much to me. And here's why. In that moment, they were finally free. but not just from the physical prison. They were free from the prison of failure that others had put them in by not believing in them, and also the prison of their own making, by not embracing their true selves, which they finally do at the end of this season. And so that's when you were like, fly, man. It was just beautiful. So I thought the ending of this season was one of the most powerful things I've ever seen. And I wonder if it had that same effect on you. Simon and Trevor are Wonder Man and Barnaby, the very roles that they're auditioning for in this show. So I loved how the script for the movie it's so meta. I love it. I think, and it's just so cleverly constructed. So the scenes that they're reading throughout the season are reflecting the actual journey that they're going on. So if you ever, if you haven't watched this yet, or you're going to go back in, or you decide to rewatch it, I urge you to really pay attention to just don't think like, oh, does this movie seem any good to me? They're very cleverly using the script to like reflect on the characters of what's actually happening to Simon and Trevor. So think about the monologue that Simon has to give about how Wonder Man was trapped in the void until Barnaby rescued him, right? Simon was trapped in his secret until Trevor rescued him. And so he felt everything that happened to Wonder Man in reality. And then, of course, that great scene where Barnaby portrays Wonder Man and he says, "We all have our price, Wonder Man. I hope you never find yours." Pretty darn good line. I think this fake Wonder Man movie was pretty well written. And indeed, Trevor was betraying Simon, which I think you could see that layer. You could see how that affected Trevor when he read those lines, because he was like, "Oh, I'm actually doing this." But, of course, and I loved that reveal at the end of episode 1 where Trevor is enjoying his salad and picks up his phone, and we find out that he was arrested, and they threatened to throw him back in jail to finish the rest of his sentence, his original sentence for being the Mandarin, if he doesn't entrap Simon for the DODC. So not only are these parallels very clever and add depth to the season, layers, but I believe they point out that grand story points in comic books, movies, etc., are just sci-fi versions of very real life things that are actually happening to us right now. So that works on 2 levels. One, it points out how actors can use their own experiences on these big, grander stories. Because you might be like, well, I've never been flung into space. And it's like, I think in some ways you have. So you have to find that parallel in your own life to create that feeling in this bigger than life adventure. And I think it also points out, the second thing is that you don't have to be in a grand adventure to have a grand adventure, right? Like these things are happening to you right now. You don't see it. You're not, because you're looking down on your own life, just like Simon was. You don't have to retreat into a fantasy. And it's just brilliant. It's just absolutely brilliant. And it allows this show to be very inexpensive and to tell the story of 2 civilians, but with all the elements of a great sci-fi story. By the way, the Joey Pants stuff was fantastic. From his first initial cameo as an actor who saw it simply as a job, who was making money not off of acting, but also from flipping houses, like the total opposite of everything that Simon and Trevor stand for, as people who truly love the craft and would do this for free, I thought that was great. I also loved when Joey, you thought he had this really this moment, because, Trevor and Simon in particular, yells at him and says, "You're a horrible person." And then you think that Joey might have a moment of self-reflection, but instead he's like, "Why aren't I reading for this Wonder Man movie?" When he calls his agent. The same reaction that Simon had, by the way, when Trevor dropped that trap, actually, we find out, of the Wonder Man auditions. I just thought that was so great. And then the callback at the end, because Trevor got hauled off to prison, who played Barnaby instead? His rival Joey Pants got the gig. Hey, the hustle pays off, baby. That's showbiz for you. And I just thought that was fantastic. And I love Trevor was like, who got the role of Barnaby instead of me? And he was coming up with all these great actors. And Simon's like, it's not important. That was great. All right, so yeah, let's talk about the Hollywood commentary. So also, as I said in my non-spoiler review, there have been a couple of shows recently, one show and one movie, that really made fun of superhero productions. So I appreciate that on this show, like the studio, while they totally acknowledge the absurdity of this business, they're also very respectful of it and try to just explain to you, or at least kind of give you a picture, honest picture as to why it's so absurd. Like, I think that's a good lesson in life. Don't always be so dismissive of something right off the bat. Try to understand why. So like the whole audition process, I think, there was, you might not be interested. I don't know. I like being a student of life, right? But so they're really teaching you a lot in every scene of this movie. So there's the audition process, and then, at Von Kovac's house, and then also even when Von Kovac is directing Simon for the first time in the Wonder Man suit. I liked that moment in particular, I have to tell you. And that's when I kind of figured out what they were doing in this regard. When, Von Kovac gave Simon like this crazy kind of like direction. He was like, he had a weird dream last night. And it really was a weird dream that he described to him. And I'm a very, I can relate to Simon in some ways. And part of it is my literalness. But when Von Kovac said, let's see what that brings out, I got what Von Kovac was trying to do. And I was like, oh, I get it. I get the process here. I get the director-actor relationship. And I thought that was just wonderful. That Von Kovac was not so literal and was trying to to inspire Simon to let go of the script and to be guided by emotion and to be in the moment, as Trevor was also teaching him to do. And I think that's why they had a director like Von Kovac. Not all directors work that way, but it was the exact opposite of how Simon was working, who was too literal, who was too attached to the script. Anyone who's had any experience in the entertainment business or the theater business, I'm sure for you also, it was painful to watch Simon blow his small part in episode 1, the first episode. It was so hard to watch him crash and burn like that. I was like, oh, Simon. And then also when he messed up his first improv scene at Von Kovac's house, where instead of improvising, he did a scene from Pretty Woman. I could feel the disappointment in Von Kovac and like the embarrassment for Simon and how everyone in the room was like, oh, I can't believe I just witnessed that. I felt that through the screen. That was incredible. And I think the show does a good job illustrating the mistakes that a lot of new actors make, right? How everyone has to learn to let go and let their emotions truly take over like they do in real life. Like that's what being in the moment I think means. And so this show is not only entertaining, but I think it's a real gift, to aspiring actors as well. A lot of acting classes, at least in my experience, have never been able to get the same thing across, right? So kudos to this show. Again, because I think it does it with kindness and letting you and guiding you, which is really great. It's not a lecture. And so I think that's beautiful. Speaking of great acting, Shola Adewusi did a wonderful job with her monologue about Simon when he was younger and this experience she had with him. So she explains to Trevor, who's trying to get intel on Simon, but ends up getting this amazing story about him when he was a child. And his mother says, I'd always felt that Simon didn't mind being alone, that he was happy, that he had his interests, and that this was a choice that he had made, and that he was cool with it. But then she said, he said something to me, thank you for loving me, Mom. And she said in that moment, she realized that her son was not okay with being alone and that there was nothing, she didn't know how to help him. And I thought that was, usually, again, as I said in my non-spoiler review, you would think a scene like that would be show, don't tell, right? Why don't we have a flashback? Why have this monologue? But I think it was in some ways more powerful because Simon in that moment as a child, I'm sure didn't quite understand what he was going through. And you'd have to have a whole lot of scenes to really convey that. But by having the mom tell this memory, she not only gives the perspective that you need, but I think like it's relatable to anyone who's ever realized something about someone who's close to them, where a really hard truth, a hard emotional truth has dawned on you, and that's real. Again, this is a great acting exercise. This actress, Adewusi, was able to like make you feel all that just with her words. That's telling, like if you got to tell instead of show, that's how you do it. And then, of course, I thought it was also quite moving, speaking of Simon's childhood, that obviously one of the reasons that Wonder Man meant so much to him was that it was his father's favorite movie when he was a child, and that, Simon was being bullied in school, and he, was really struggling with his powers that he was keeping a secret at that point. I don't know if his father knew about it or not. His brother clearly had an inkling. But his father said, why don't we take a day off? And they both played hooky from school and work, and his father took him to see this movie that he loved. And we also find out, and I think it's interesting that the show never even discusses the details of Simon's father's death, but we know that it was sometime around then. So that's just really powerful stuff. Okay, so let's now switch to another actor within the show, and that's the infamous Doorman. That's right, Doorman, of the infamous Doorman clause, why every actor auditioning has to sign a waiver saying that they do not have superpowers. Because, you can't get insurance based on what happened with Doorman. Now, Doorman wasn't a professional actor, and neither is Byron Bowers. But that's okay, because just like Doorman, Byron Bowers is very sincere and has a ton of charisma. And so I think he worked really well in the role. Because again, Doorman was not supposed to be a professional actor. So that awkwardness worked really well. This was what did you think of this episode? Like kind of having a standalone episode in the middle of the show. I think it was worth the time. You might say, on other Disney Marvel shows or even Star Wars shows, you'd be like, we don't have the time for this. But I really enjoyed this, little flashback. So Doorman starts out working at the door of a nightclub as a bouncer. And he becomes a literal door thanks to some discarded rocks and chemicals. I don't know why he touched them. I was like, don't touch that. What are you doing, buddy? But interestingly enough, he got the powers from Cloak and Dagger, who are also Marvel characters, by the way. I was like, oh yeah, he's Cloak. I don't know why they didn't just make him Cloak, but then I guess they don't have to have a dagger. And so that wouldn't have worked. But then anyway, because it turns out, so Josh Gad used to go to the club and he was kind of like casual friends with Doorman, more just like, hey, buddy. But then so Doorman saves all these club goers from a fire and Josh Gad is there that night. And that's how the world discovers that he has these powers. And so Josh Gad is making a movie and they're like, how can we come up with an inventive way for you to get in and out of a safe? And he's like, oh, I not only know of a way, I'm friends with Doorman, who's now a celebrity for saving all these people, but also it'll save us on the VFX budget because the guy can actually do it. That was fantastic. The use of Josh Gad here was incredible. And I loved the dance version of In Summer. I loved him performing it in the club when he poured water on that guy and the lights were flashing and the camera moved in. I was like, you guys are going to do a music video of this, right? Because he only sang a few bars in the club and then they had the whole song over the end credits. But I think this is the best Disney club remix or, cover of a Disney song that's like kind of current since Lana Del Rey did Once Upon a Dream. I mean, the In Summer, 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 that was my favorite bit. I loved it. I hope they release it. That's the only problem with this not being a weekly show. If this was a weekly show, I think this would have a better shot of standing out. What did you think of it? It's in the end credits of episode 4 if you missed it. You can hear the whole song. But yeah, so Doorman becomes a huge star. He's making all these, they make a ton of sequels to this heist movie with Josh Gad. And then one fateful day when they're doing the latest sequel, Josh Gad filming a scene, he's like, all right, I'm going to go through you and come out the other side. And they're really doing it because, they want to save on the visual effects budget. So Josh Gad goes into Doorman and doesn't come out. He never comes out. In the MCU, Josh Gad is somewhere lost in Doorman. That's so great. I love that they committed to it. And I wonder if they'll ever pick up that thread. Maybe again in season 2, it'll be the search for Josh Gad. I would love that. So yeah, I loved Wonder Man. And I hope people discover it. I hope people give it a chance. And I hope they appreciate that even though this is a little different, that it's really special. It's just a little under 4 hours. And I think these 8 episodes establish one of the strongest bonds I've ever seen between 2 characters anywhere. I mean, I need to see Simon and Trevor again, and I need to see them together. I love that. I love that they're a team. I think that's just so beautiful. There have been other teams in the MCU. I think like Loki and Mobius kind of come close to this, but this is like that, like times like a billion. Like, I think whenever you see one of them, you're going to be like, where's the other one? I told you in real life, I know people who've gotten tired of that, but I don't know. I don't think that Simon and Trevor ever would. I think they're more than friends. I think at this point, they're family. But yeah, I love that they're anti-heroes. I love that they break the rules. I love that they're con men. I love it. Because in a very difficult world, as I said, it's better to hold on to someone than something. So I just loved this. I loved it. What did you think? Share your thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.